The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. You know, today I have a very, very interesting guy on my show. And people say to me all the time, don't call them interesting, call them talented. And this is a talented guy. And he's the assistant professor of trumpet and artistic director of jazz and chamber ensembles at FAU. And I want to welcome to my show, and his name is
Dr. Courtney Jones.
Good. That's what I was waiting for. Now, Courtney, I didn't forget your name. I promise you. I just wanted everybody to hear your voice. Now, let's talk about what music does for people. You know, I always say that music transforms people in ways they can't even describe. And that's what I think your music does, because when I saw you, you were just marvelous. You conducted, you played, you did everything. So what's your feelings about music and what music does for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. And I'm really looking forward to having these types of conversations, right? And to answer your question, secondly, music is something that transverses time, space, language, and it's something that's universal, right? And so you don't necessarily need to speak the language of music to understand what someone is saying in that aspect, because we're dealing with vibrational frequencies and sonic space. And so it's something that, you know, that is universal. And in addition to that, it's a healing component, right, for the world, in my opinion. That's what music is. That's what music does. You know, like if you have a busy day or a stressful day, sometimes you'll come home and, you know, have a Dr. Pepper, whether it's in a single malt or a nice Cabernet Sauvignon or a Malbec or maybe some water or some herbal tea. Then you sit on some music. Why? Because you play that music that helps heal the soul after having a stressful day, or to allow Ixion's will to stop turning just for a moment so that you can get your thoughts and your emotions in check. And so music is a healing component that's utilized universally, in my opinion, for the soul and for the human condition.
You know, I'm so happy you mentioned the human condition, because no matter what war, no matter what is happening around the world, you know, if you play music or you sing or you even dance, I mean, I'm adding that to it because it's very important. People from different countries, even if they are at war together, music brings them together. Don't you think so? I mean, isn't music not only a healing tool, but also a way to really get people to like each other rather than, you know, hate each other as they do today?
Well, sure, right? I mean, you could say that, and I think music is utilized for social justices, social causes, and it's a social music, right? And whether it is in retaliation of something that is unjust, or coming together for a wonderful occasion. You know, people will use song and dance to express their feelings. And I think depending on the trajectory in which it's being utilized, it can bring people together, right?
Yes.
As a unit or a composite of said unit. So sure.
Yeah. Now you're a young guy, and the music that you play is the music of the past. You know, Cole Porter. I mean, I can name a dozen people. And as a young guy, what really turned you on to this music?
Well, for me, you know, I am a musician first, right? Who happens to play an instrument, right? And in this case, the trumpet. But, you know, music is transversal. You know, there are multiple styles. You know, people want to, you know, utilize music as, or it's either classical or it's jazz. It's either legit or non-legit, you know, and I think that's incorrect. and I don't see genre. I see style. And for me, you either feel the beat on 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. That's it. And Duke Ellington says it best. There's good music, and then there's the other kind, right? He doesn't say there's jazz. He doesn't say there's classical. He doesn't say there's klezmer. He doesn't say this or et cetera, et cetera. He says it's either good music or the other kind. And I think we need, as a society, to get out of that bubble of what's legit, what's non-legit, right? It's either, I'm sorry if you hear a little snoring, that is not me and my distaste. That is my French bulldog under my desk, and she is.
Well, we'll accept the dog.
Okay.
But
I
love your answer.
But yes, but you know, and the caveat is that if we always put music into, well, it's going to be this, and this is fine, and this is not necessarily fine, then you're missing the point of its most important thing, which is to heal and to bring people together. And the type of music that I play, to answer your question, is music that feels good, regardless of the genre, right? It's music that feels good. Now, as the artistic director of jazz and chamber ensembles here at Florida Atlantic University, we play a mixture of styles, right? Of music that was once popular, that you heard on the radio in today's, advent, the Shania Twains, and the Beyoncés and the Aretha Franklins and, and all them, that was the Ella Fitzgeralds, and that was, the Billie Holidays, and the Sarah Vaughns, right? And music supersedes, in my opinion, time, as I said earlier, right? So it allows us to play the music that makes us feel what? Good, and I try to bring that awareness to my students and the students here at Florida Atlantic University, because in order for us to know where we are currently, we have to know where we came from so that we know where to go, right? And that's where I believe people should approach music, right? And that way, you either like it or you don't, but that's your problem, not mine, you know? And as Ellington, Duke Ellington said, there's good music, and then there's the other kind.
Well, speaking about the other kind,
sure.
Today the music of the youth happens to be hip hop and all kinds of other things that are, that for me, it's, something that I can't really understand. But what about you? Do you think that music, and I say it again, the rap music is something that you can really put your arms around?
Well, music is music, right? You can take rap, you can take hip hop, you can take rock, you can take country, you can take acid jazz, you can take metal, rock. I mean, you can take all that type of music. You can take techno, you can take electronic, right? It's still vibrational frequencies. And when you're talking about hip hop and when you're talking about rap, I mean, again, in all sorts of genres, you're going to have good music and you're going to have the other kind. And there are some hip hop artists that I truly appreciate, like Common, and when he approaches that type of music, and his approach to what he does. And then you look at Erykah Badu, you look at India Arie, you look at these players and these musicians, these artists that talk about what's happening socially, right? It's the same process when you look at. And there's no other difference when you look at rock. When there's talking about, certain rock, there are certain parts where they, you look at Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath when he was talking about X, Y, and Z and biting heads off of bats, right? I mean, every genre, every style, every period has their own other kind of music. But the question is, what's the message, right? That's what I listen for. I don't care of the style. Whether it's rock, whether it's rap, whether it's hip hop, whether it's whatever, classical, jazz. My question is, what's the message that's being presented? Because you have good messages in all styles of music. You have good messages and awareness of all styles of whether it's rap, whether it's hip hop, whether it's country, whether it's rock. And you also have messages that, in my opinion, that are not necessarily conducive to the overall human condition and all styles of music. So it's not just one thing, right? And so I think sometimes, with each generation, there is with a newer generation, there's a generation that would see, well, we don't necessarily look at X, Y, and Z the right way, and X, and it's not necessarily good. When people thought, if you look at, the mamas and the papas, in the 70s, not many people that weren't of that generation didn't like that. You look at the people who heard Marvin Gaye, and they didn't like that. The older generation didn't really care for what Marvin Gaye was saying, but what he was truly saying, he was talking about what was happening at that time, right? He was talking about, what's going on, what was happening in the 70s, the war, right? The Vietnam War, what was going on. And you have these artists that would make music of the time that's happening. This is why we call it social music, right? Yeah. And then even amongst that, you also have the chaos, right? So there's a balance of what artists do regarding how they express their creativity. And I think that with each generation within the genre, the style, you have artists that have good music, that are rap artists that are great. And then you also have the artist that is the other kind of music. But again, I say to you, what is the message? And I think if we hear what the message is first, then we can understand, okay, then it's up to you whether or not you feel that if it's conducive to the overall human condition, or what are they really trying to say?
Yeah.
What's really happening? And I think it's the message that's most important, regardless of the style.
Courtney, one of the things that has been happening, as you know, we've been living in chaotic times, and I'm sure it affected your band, your orchestra. So what did you do during that time? Were you able to play music, or just, play at home and, enjoy just the experience of doing it? I mean, what did you do? Because right now things are changing and music is really kind of starting again. So I'm interested in knowing a little bit about why and how you handled the downtime.
Right. So no one expected that we were going to go through a pandemic, and COVID-19 put everything into check and into perspective. Right? Because we were thinking, oh, okay, well, it'll blow over. It's a X, Y, and Z. It's a flu. It'll be fine, blah, blah. But it wasn't that, right? And then it brought a lot of stuff to the surface regarding how regardless if you're on the right side or the right wing or the left wing, it doesn't matter. What people tend to forget, it's a part of the same bird, right? And so when we go through these processes, we have to come together and figure out, well, how do we do this? And as a teacher, it was fine for the first, 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then you realize, wait a minute, this is going to be a thing now, right? Because compared to any other discipline, you just can't play over the internet, right? But you have to deal with the latency issue. You have to deal with, like intonation things. And then if there's a internet connection that's, not that's unstable, then, one person drops, and then, or if you're hosting, then you drop and then everyone's gone. So you have to deal with a lot of technological issues that we really didn't necessarily have to deal with. And then when everybody, right? Everybody is dealing with that. Then it's overwhelming for the hosting, the person that's hosting, whether it's Zoom, whether it's WebEx or whatever. And so we have to think outside the quote unquote proverbial box to figure out how can we continue to do something normal that's abnormal. Well, you can't. Okay, you couldn't do that. So one of my issues after that was, well, what I did, was focusing on one thing. And you know what that one thing was? Their mental health. Like to know. Their mental health. Because everybody dealt with this differently. Some people felt that this was the perfect opportunity to rest. And then other people felt like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? But what we realized, what I took away from this, is that when something forces us to not fellowship together, it does something to us subconsciously. And so we realized that music is not just showing up, playing an instrument and playing whole notes and half notes and maybe a quarter note or an eighth note or 16th, 32nd here, but it's a social construct that allows those who are doing it to speak musically with one another so that we can take that and do the same thing verbally as human beings, right? And so I wanted to make sure that everyone was mentally okay with it, and then put down the horn. Let's talk a little bit. I used to have coffee talks before the pandemic, and I had at least 3 or 4 coffee talks a day, with different students because they didn't know how to deal with something that was thrown upon them, right? No one really dealt with a pandemic. I wasn't alive during the Great Depression, but I read about it. And that really, and yes, you can look at, I think Spanish flu, influenza, that was a little bit later, somewhere around that time, but not to the level of this. And when we have to sit down, it puts things into perspective. Like, how do we do this? So fast forward a little bit, we finally slowly but surely came back. And I think this is before before we were able to get my age bracket, the vaccine and the booster. And I said to my students, I said, look, I know we're slowly but surely coming back. I'm not going to have us, pick up the ball and just go 60 miles per hour. We have all dealt with something, differently. My focus is, one, how are you doing? That was my focus.
Well,
Not like, hey, how are you doing? And making sure everything's like, no. Hey, how are you doing? Let's talk about it. And then slowly but surely pick up the horn, and do, exercises to bring back that communal vibe of what music is and what it does. And I think sometimes, more often than not, we think that we can just get back into it. But, something happened. Something happened over these past 2 years, and not many people are back to where it was because now we have a new sense of normalcy. Yeah. We have a new sense. And so we have to slowly but surely get back on the horse so that we can do it different and better this time. And I think some of us have forgotten that we've been given a second chance.
Yeah. Something, I'm so pleased that you talked about mental health
Sure.
because during this pandemic, people suffered. There was no question. They didn't know what was going on. Sure. They didn't know if they would get sick. There were so many things I can't even talk about them because it really breaks my heart to think that for 2 years, people couldn't pursue their profession. But let's talk about you.
Sure.
How did you really begin? When did you start playing music? And were you inspired by anybody in particular?
So I started at a very, very early age. My brother and sister, my siblings, there was a piano always in the house, and we were always surrounded by music, different styles, whether it's gospel, whether it's Latin, whether it's jazz, whether it's classical, we were always surrounded by music. And it was very easy for me to kind of associate myself to music because I saw it differently. And there's no pun because I have what they call synesthesia. And I'm able to equate color to sound. And so as a child, I could hear something and say, oh, wow, well, that's a pretty, that's a pretty color and that's a pretty vibration because I could literally see it. I really can't explain it. Some people have and some people don't. I'm one of those ones who kind of has that. And then I began to approach it with playing piano, hearing stuff on the radio and then, banging it out on the piano and realizing, oh, I'm transcribing this, and I'm listening to it. And my first theme song was that I did was the Sesame Street.
Ah.
Da dum bum ba da dum da da dum, and that's the major third. Try it. Da da do so mi do da 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 so mi do. And then I just began to put one thing to another, and then using my sister's books and realizing, oh, this finger goes here, this finger goes there. And so I pretty much taught myself how to play piano. And then later on in, your primary school, you get a chance to play in the band, and I end up playing trumpet. And then, music just came really naturally for me, in addition to everything else. But I enjoyed the fact that I could create sound through an inanimate object. And that was awesome for me. I really enjoyed that.
It sounds like it was a wonderful experience, but you must have had inspiration from your parents. Parents are very important if you want to play an instrument of sorts because they give you the heads up. And a lot of parents wouldn't do that because they think, oh my God, my son, my daughter is going to get into music and there's no money in it. And it's a very tough thing to do. So how did your parents feel about you getting involved in music?
Well, first of all, I want to, cut that stigmata, or the stigma, not stigmata, that stigma of, oh, if you get into music, there's no money. I think that is the worst stereotype ever, because, people think, oh, you have to be, this versus, a lawyer or a doctor or a financial advisor to make money. No, you can do the same thing in any profession. The question is, do you have the discipline to execute that? And I think a lot of people who say that, they don't necessarily have the discipline to do that. Now, you have to create opportunity when there is none, right? You say, oh, you're lucky when you get this. No, you're lucky. No. Creating opportunity when there is no deals with preparation, crossing paths with opportunity. So when my parents, they're like, they supported me. I wanted to go to school to be a psychologist. I did that for one semester and I was like, I was good. Then it was like, no, maybe business marketing and management, but my passion, that wasn't my gift, right? That wasn't my gift. My gift was music. And at an early age, my parents were the type of individuals that said, look, we will support you and whatever you do. Just make sure you do it wholeheartedly and with every fiber in your being. And, I really appreciate that from my parents because they were there supporting. My mom was there. My dad was there, mainly my mom a good bit because she carried me everywhere from the bowling alley to all the concerts and all that stuff. And my dad was there with us at the same time. So, it was always there, but it's knowing how, and this is with the individual, in my opinion, again, it's knowing how to differentiate your passion from your gift. And let me explain what I mean by that. I am passionate about cooking, but I'm not going to open a restaurant. I am passionate about, my plants, but I'm not going to open up, a garden shop or some sort. I am passionate about, landscaping, like doing my own yard work, but I'm not going to start my landscaping business. I am passionate about those things. My gift, however, is something that has been given to me by a higher power or an entity or a source that I can't even fathom. I think it, I just do it without thinking about it. That's music, and that is the ability to communicate that through the medium of education. Now, I don't have to think about that. So, there are different doctrines and different ideologies that we are created by whomever or whatever X, Y, and Z. But all these philosophies, depending on, where your religion or your spiritual awareness is, they share the same thing, is that we are created in the image of this thing, this entity, this being, whatever that is. We are created for greatness. And if we are created for greatness and we are a part of that entity and that being, that means that the gift that we do without thinking about it, that's what we need to be doing. If you eat, sleep, breathe, digest music, that is what you need to be doing. If you eat, sleep, breathe, taking things apart, then become an engineer. And you see where I'm going with this analogy. And this is a thing where you don't have to think about it, where that is your career. So if it's music, you can be the John Williams. You can be the Florentine Price. You can be the Alison Bossums or the Wynton Marsalises, or you can be the Michael Giacchinos or the Jesse Montgomerys or the Jesse Normans or the Leontine Prices. If that is what your gift is, that is what you need to do. Not a passion. I'm passionate about the other things, but my gift is that. So when my parents saw that, they invested that energy in me. And it's like that nature versus nurture approach, right? So you get the nurture from your nucleo, and then you get the nature depending on the environment in which you're in to help develop that gift. So for me, that's how I got into that my career is music.
Courtney, one of the things that I think is so important is that you probably have great advice for a lot of young people out there, because you've been experiencing music for a while and you have such a passion and such an idea of what it takes to make music work for you. Sure. But the question becomes, how does it work for others? What I'm asking is, with the next generation,
Gotcha.
I'm interested in understanding what you would tell them.
Well, my thing is, I would just say what I said earlier. Be able to differentiate your passion from your gift. And do what you need to do that makes you feel good, right? If you enjoy doing something, then do that, but do it wholeheartedly and not from a place of complacency or mediocrity.
Right.
Because if you do that, then, as my dad would say, you're half-ass. You don't want to do that. It's like drinking water. Do you want it hot or cold? Lukewarm is not good. It's not good. It's the same process of going out and finding what you want to do. Do it from a place of love. Be able to differentiate your passion from your gift and know the definition from those two. And while you're doing that, surround yourself with a like-minded collective in the community, so that you're surrounded by that same energy, because energy begets energy. And as iron sharpens iron, so will I sharpen you. And so if you're surrounded by that same energy, then everyone within that collective will be able to work cohesively together and get to the point of success. Can't, in other words, come with the BS.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well,
that is an interesting thing that you say, because honesty, I mean, you could project it with music, because when you play well, people know it. When you're off a little bit, they know it as well. But here's the thing. I want to know what's in store for you now, Courtney, because you played in the band. The virus is almost over. People don't think about that much.
Sure.
And what's in store for you next?
Well, I mean, since we've come back, I've gone and I still have done my solo performances, as an artist, as a clinician, as a virtuoso soloist with Rodney Marsalis, with my quintet, the Gateways Brass Collective, playing principal at the Color Music Festival and with the Gateways Music Festival. And I'm still doing my thing, but we had to take precautions, getting tested, and making sure that the venues were good, because, we want to make sure that to continue what we're doing as artists, that we all work cohesively and together to allow those within the creative arts, not just music, but dance and performance and, and literature, to be able to do. In our case, we have to use our instruments. So it's been working relatively well. And my next thing that I'm doing right now is I have my Carnegie Hall debut in 2 weeks. Yeah. So yeah,
that is amazing. You've really reached the top, haven't you?
I'm always looking for more opportunities to improve. Let's just look at it like that.
Well, it sounds to me like you are an amazing person, and you're a great teacher. You've done so many different things, and you're going to continue going up and up and up and up and up. And it's so great to hear all of your philosophy, if you will. And thank you so much for being on the Susan Brender Show. Now, is there anything that you want to tell the audience about where you're going, and what, if you've written a book or any album that you have out?
So I have an active website at www.cjones, that's CJONES, trumpet, cjonestrumpet.com. That's an active website that has my schedule, that has all of my events that I am doing. So if you want to keeping, up with me via social media, I have that. And as far as any upcoming projects, I am just waiting till after Carnegie Hall to think about anything moving forward regarding that type of stuff. But all my information, anything that you want to keep up with it, please go to my website. That's www.cjonestrumpet.com, and you can find out what's happening in my world. And if you're around Florida on April 15th at 7 p.m., at Florida Atlantic University, the FAU Jazz Orchestra will be playing our final concert for the spring semester, and that's at 7 p.m. And we would love to see you guys there. It's going to be a wonderful show, because we're also sharing it with Boca High School as our guest artist this year. And this is the first time we've had this since 2019. So I am really excited I'm really excited about this upcoming concert on the 15th at 7 p.m. at University Theater at Florida Atlantic University.
And you know something? I'll tell you the other thing. You know, when I saw you, I knew that something was very special about you. I wanted you to know that, because when people listen to this particular show, they're going to realize that there's somebody out there like you, and you're an inspiration. So thank you very much for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's really, really a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan, and I'm looking forward to collaborating soon.